Olivia, darling, you can't seriously be going through with this boutique idea. My mother's voice carried that polished, withering tone she'd perfected over decades of high society maneuvering. She stood inside my freshly leased storefront, an Hermès scarf draped elegantly around her neck despite the July heat, eyeing my collection of designer consignment pieces like they were thrift store rejects. At 32, I was expected to be knee-deep in the family's real estate empire. Instead, I was launching Second Chance Luxury, a high-end consignment boutique in the heart of Manhattan's fashion district. The lease is signed, Mom, I said as I adjusted a vintage Chanel suit on its hanger, carefully omitting the fact that I actually owned the building through one of my holding companies. The grand opening's next week. Right on cue, my brother Marcus strutted in, tailored Italian suit, smug grin, and that same condescension he'd wielded since childhood. As heir apparent to Harrison Properties, Marcus never passed up a chance to remind me where I ranked in the family pecking order. Baby sis, he drawled, dragging a finger across a display shelf and glancing at it like he expected dust. Still playing dress up? You do know Dad's mortified at the club, a Harrison, selling used clothes, and all that. I resisted the urge to mention that, while he was busy play-acting the role of mogul with Daddy's help, I had quietly built Metropolitan Holdings into one of the most powerful real estate investment firms in New York. The boutique? That was just the front, my camouflage while I bought up properties across the city, including several the Harrisons prized most. These aren't just used clothes, Marcus, I said, repositioning a Dior handbag. They're curated vintage pieces. There's real demand. A market? He laughed, the sound bouncing off the exposed brick I'd hand-picked during renovations. Real estate is the only market that matters. You went to Wharton for this? If only he knew. My degree had built an empire beneath their noses. Speaking of real estate, Mom interjected, your father's very concerned about the Harrison building lease. The new owners jacking up the rates. Completely unreasonable. I fought the grin threatening to break across my face, thinking of the paperwork waiting on my real desk, 30 floors above the city. The Harrison building, the family's jewel, the seat of their empire, had been one of my earliest acquisitions, tucked away under layers of anonymous shell companies. That's awful, I said sweetly. Have you met the new landlord? Marcus scoffed. No one's seen them. Some faceless group called Metropolitan Holdings. Probably some offshore firm trying to squeeze us out. But Dad'll sort it out. He always does. If only he knew Dad had been trying to contact me, or rather, the shadowy executive persona behind my company, for weeks. The brutal lease terms I'd sent weren't just business, they were bait. I'm sure he will, I said, watching Marcus sneer at a Valentino tag. $7,000 for a second-hand dress? He muttered. This is humiliating. You're a Harrison. We build legacies. We don't play shopgirl. The irony nearly made me laugh. While they clung to their handful of landmark buildings, I had quietly amassed control of more than 70% of Manhattan's prime commercial spaces, including, recently, the building that housed Marcus's favorite steakhouse, the hotel where Mom threw her charity galas, and, of course, the Harrison building itself. Mom sighed, brushing her manicured fingers over a silk scarf. Remember when you were little? You used to come to the office with your father, Mom said, her voice softening as she glanced around the boutique, learning about property values, market trends. Now look at you. I did remember. I remembered everything, every chart he showed me, every late-night strategy discussion, every deal dissected over dinner. I'd just taken those lessons and built something far greater than they'd ever imagined, while they kept underestimating me. The lease meeting's tomorrow, Marcus announced, checking his Rolex with exaggerated flair. Dad's bringing in the board. Time to show this Metropolitan Holdings that the Harrisons don't get pushed around. Right then, my phone buzzed. A text from my real estate director. All arrangements confirmed. They're walking right into it. 5 years of silent acquisition. 5 years of being dismissed as a hobbyist with a boutique. And tomorrow, the truth would finally step into the light. Good luck with that, I said, watching them exit without a second glance, neither of them noticing the small, engraved Metropolitan Holdings logo in the bottom corner of my boutique's window. Mom paused at the door. It's not too late, darling, she said gently. Your father could still find a place for you in the family business. If only she knew, tomorrow, they'd be asking me for a place in mine. That night, from the penthouse of Metropolitan Towers, I reviewed the final lease documents, the city glittering beneath me. On a side monitor, The boutique security feed played quietly, habit, after years of managing two separate lives. Kate entered with coffee and tomorrow's schedule. The Harrison Properties Board will arrive at 9 a.m. sharp, she said, a spark of anticipation in her tone. Your father's assistant called 3 times today, desperate to reach Mr. Metropolitan for last-minute negotiations. I smiled faintly. Let them keep thinking the elusive owner was a man. The longer they guessed, the sweeter the reveal. Everything arranged? Yes, Miss Harrison. The conference room is prepped, security's briefed, and the documents are ready. She hesitated, then added with a grin. Your nameplate has been installed on the building's main entrance. It's covered for now, but tomorrow. I crossed to the window, watching the city pulse with life. My city, though almost no one knew it. Below, the boutique still glowed, its staff helping late-evening customers. A perfect front, a perfect deception. 5 years, I murmured. 5 years of them laughing at that boutique, while I quietly bought up half of Manhattan. 5 years of their speeches about legacy, while I built one 10 times bigger. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Family dinner next week. Last chance to come to your senses before Dad cuts you off for good. I set it down. Tomorrow would answer that message for me. The next morning, I entered Metropolitan Towers through the private executive entrance, dressed in a power suit worth more than most of my boutique's inventory. Kate was already waiting. The Harrison team's downstairs. Your father's, let's just say, not used to being told to wait. Security says he's getting loud. She handed me a tablet. The live feed showed them, impatient, frustrated, entitled, everything I expected. Let them stew for 10 minutes, I said, settling behind my desk, then bring them up. When they were finally escorted to the top floor, Marcus walked in like he owned the building. Dad wore his practiced negotiator's expression. Mom glanced around with her trademark blend of judgment and disapproval. On screen, I watched Kate greet them with unshakable professionalism. Welcome to Metropolitan Holdings. Right this way. This is absurd, Dad snapped. We don't play games with ghost companies. We're the Harrisons. Mr. Harrison, Kate replied smoothly. Ario has been looking forward to this meeting. The door to my office opened. They stepped inside, and froze. I stood behind my desk, the Metropolitan Holdings logo gleaming behind me, the Manhattan skyline at my back. Olivia, Marcus blurted, completely thrown. What are you doing here? Where's the owner? I rose slowly, savoring every second of the moment I'd been building for 5 long, silent years. You're looking at her. Welcome to my office, I said, calmly. This is absurd, Dad snapped, his face reddening. Enough games, Olivia, this is a serious negotiation. Oh, I'm being very serious. I tapped a button on my desk. The wall screens came alive, lighting up with high-resolution portfolios, dozens of prime buildings spanning Manhattan, all stamped with the Metropolitan Holdings insignia. While you were mocking my boutique, I said, rising slowly, I was building this. That anonymous buyer who outbid you on Riverside? Me. The foreign investors who acquired the Harrison building? Me. The reason you keep losing to untraceable competition? Me. Mom sank into a visitor chair, her carefully trained poise flickering. But, your little shop was the perfect front, I said. No one suspects that disappointment with a dress shop is quietly orchestrating billion-dollar real estate deals. While you laughed, I was acquiring half the city, including most of your prized assets. Marcus lunged forward, snatching the lease documents from my desk. His hands trembled as he flipped through the clauses, his skin going pale. These terms, these acquisition triggers, you're not just raising our rent, you're forcing a sale. Smart of you to notice, I said coolly. The Harrison building isn't just your headquarters, it's your cornerstone. These lease terms will bleed you dry, unless you sell. And guess who holds first right of purchase? Dad slammed his fist on the desk, his voice thunderous. You can't do this to your own family. We gave you everything. You gave me criticism, dismissal. But you also gave me something far more valuable, an education. I just used it more effectively than you ever imagined. Mom looked shaken. The boutique, all those women selling their designer bags, were sources, I replied. You'd be amazed what people confess while offloading Chanel. Divorces, debt, liquidity issues. I knew which families were desperate, which properties were vulnerable, before the brokers did. My boutique gave me access your country club never could. I pressed another button. The screens shifted to live security feeds, the Richardson Tower, the Plaza Shopping Complex, a dozen landmarks across Manhattan. The Richardson Tower, mine. The Plaza Complex, mine. That luxury project on Fifth Avenue you've been dying to break into, Marcus, already mine. But the Capitol, he stammered, you couldn't have started this on your own. With the trust fund you mocked, I replied. Every cent went into my first property, then I leveraged it, over and over. While you were flashing family wealth, I was multiplying mine, building an empire 10 times the size of Harrison Properties. At that moment, Kate entered with a fresh stack of documents. The final ownership transfers, Miss Harrison, she said, placing them on the desk, and your board is standing by. Dad's face turned ashen. Our board? No, I said, mine. I now hold controlling interest in most of your partner companies. Today's meeting isn't just about a lease, it's about a merger. Harrison Properties is being absorbed by Metropolitan Holdings. I gestured to the papers. You have 2 options. Sign the agreement and retain your titles, under my leadership. Or walk away and watch everything collapse. Silence. Then Mom, her voice barely above a whisper, said, all those dinners, all those conversations, you were listening. I was studying, I said. Every deal you bragged about, I was already 3 steps ahead. Every time you dismissed me, I bought another piece of your empire. You taught me how the game works, I just played it better. Marcus slumped into a chair, staring blankly. The galas, the events, the boutique, were brilliant networking tools. I wasn't selling clothes, I was selling a character, the harmless little sister, the failure. You bought it, hook, line, and legacy. I stepped toward the window, the skyline stretching out like a crown beneath me. This lease renewal, a formality. By the end of today, Harrison Properties will be a subsidiary of Metropolitan Holdings. You can either adjust to working for me, or pack your things. Silence fell again, thicker than before. Then Dad picked up the pen, his hand shaking slightly. You outplayed us all, he said quietly, and signed.